Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. It is the middle of July and the garden has changed a lot. So let's go on a little walk through the garden today and I'll show you what's growing. So as we head into the garden, you'll see that the garden is really exploding with growth. I would say it's mostly positive. There are some negatives, of course, too. If you were here for my last garden tour, then you can see that so much has changed since then. This is the time of year when the garden just really explodes with growth. We're getting into peak gardening season, and while we're definitely not in peak harvest season yet here in Connecticut, I know that it's coming, and I'm finally starting to see signs that harvest will be here soon. I am unfortunately continuing to see signs of some disease and some plants that are struggling as well, but we'll talk about that as we get to it. So first, let's talk about these arched trellises. As you can see, these are definitely not in their full glory yet, but this is somewhere where I can see so much growth since the last garden tour. So you can see the cucumbers they're finally starting to climb. They're lush and beautiful. We are starting to get some fruits. We haven't harvested any yet, but you can see we have lots of flowers. Now, most of these are male flowers. When you see these on the long skinny stem are male flowers. The female flowers, this one has been pollinated already. So here's one that hasn't been pollinated yet. You can see that this one has a tiny fruit at the base. So cucumbers are a type of plant that needs to have both male and female flowers blooming at the same time. Here's a female flower that's open. So this will hopefully get pollinated and turn into a nice little cucumber for us. So on this side of the trellis, I have mostly homemade pickles cucumbers with a couple lemon cucumbers mixed in. And on this side over here, you can see these are a little bit more behind, but they are catching up nicely. I have silver slicer cucumbers. So let's see if I can find. You can see here this little female flower, which hopefully got pollinated. You see how it's kind of a creamy color as opposed to the green of the pickles. So my cucumbers this year are actually doing quite well. These are seeds that I planted directly in the ground. In the past, cucumbers do prefer to be direct sown, so I like to do that when possible. The past couple years though, I have had something, I think slugs, nibbling on my seedlings as soon as they come up, and so the only way I've been able to get cucumbers to be successful was to start some transplants and plant them out when they're a little bit larger and more able to withstand the slug damage. So this year I did start some transplants, and I also started some seeds directly in the ground, but this year I didn't end up needing the transplants. So they're in another part of the garden that we'll look at in a little bit. Nothing goes to waste here, but if things go well, we will probably have an extra abundant cucumber year. So that's something to be very excited about. This is my broccoli bed, which there's not really anything all that exciting going on in here right now. I've got some side shoots. These actually are a little bit, I should have harvested those a couple days ago. But these broccoli plants are putting off side shoots. I've already harvested the main heads, and the lettuce that I had in there as companion plant is bolting, so not too much to look at in there. I do want to mention, of course, this beautiful chamomile. I like to edge my beds with, low-growing plants that will support pollinators and just basically create a living mulch and just add some beauty. So we've got some alyssum here. The chamomile, of course, although it's planted on the edge of the bed, is spilling into the walkway, but it's really lovely. Nasturtiums are starting to bloom, which is lovely. Over here we have some others. I really like that deep red one. That's a really pretty one as well. So this bed here, you can see the zucchinis are really starting to take off. Similarly to the cucumbers, you can see we have a female flower here, not blooming yet. Zucchinis and other squashes also depend on having both male flowers and female flowers blooming at the same time for pollination. So if you're seeing lots of flowers on your cucumbers or zucchinis, melons are similar as well. If you're seeing lots of flowers but you're not seeing any fruit, one thing you want to check and see is if male and female flowers are blooming at the same time, because they do both have to be blooming at the same time for pollination. Now, it is really common for plants in those families to bloom with only male flowers at the beginning, basically to get the pollinators into the habit of coming by. And then once you've had just male flowers for a week or two, a lot of times they'll start putting out female flowers then, and since the pollinators are in the habit of coming by, they should get pollinated then. One thing I do always like to do is plant 2 zucchini plants together. I think here actually only one germinated. But I do like to plant 2 squashes together like that because I think, and basically have them grow together as one plant. I think that increases the chance of pollination. Although this one has lots of flowers, so I don't think it'll be an issue here. None of these have turned into fruits yet because, as you can see, only the male flowers have bloomed. But this female flower should be blooming in a day or 2, and hopefully will get pollinated. Now this particular bloom is actually on the way out, but look how beautiful. This is the Benares Salmon Rose variety, and I really love it. I have been growing the Benares giant wine zinnia for a little while, and it's really lovely. I do have some of those blooming in the garden, so we'll take a look at those in a minute. But I decided to branch out this year and try some of the other colors, so the Salmon Rose is really lovely. I think that might be a new favorite. So you can see I like to have lots of flowers, basically intermingled with my vegetables. This Cosmos should bloom really soon and should be lovely. So here are my tomatoes. Now, I did mention signs of disease, particularly in the tomatoes. You can see we've got some crispy leaves here, little bits of disease. That plant over there is wilty, which I'm really hoping is environmental and not some sort of disease, but I'm going to keep an eye on it and we'll see. Hopefully I don't have to pull that plant out. So my tomatoes have been really hard hit with disease this year. Now, I don't think there's been a year that I've gardened that I have not had some sort of tomato disease. Summers here, while Connecticut is known as a cooler area, and it is cooler than a lot of other areas, we do still have hot summers, and the summers tend to be very humid. And I have found every year since I started growing tomatoes, my tomatoes get some sort of disease. Now you'll see that as we go through the garden, you'll see I'm not growing my tomatoes in the ideal way to prevent disease. I will definitely admit that. I have them spaced closely together, and I don't always rotate my crops. Now, I have done a lot of those things in the past. I've been very particular about following the rules a lot more closely. And honestly, I found that it didn't really make a difference. My tomatoes got disease no matter what I did. So I stopped being as picky about following the rules. I space my tomatoes a little more closely than recommended, and I don't always rotate. It depends kind of on the year. So those are things. I would do both of those things better if I had more space, if I had the ideal growing environment. But since I don't, I'm making the best of what I have. And I find that generally I do get good results. I do always get tomato disease, as I said, but usually I am able to get a pretty significant harvest before the plants succumb. So my goal has stopped being to prevent disease because I found that I don't think it's really realistically possible because I am committed to gardening organically. I'm sure there are all kinds of sprays and chemicals I could put on my plants that would prevent all of this. But as I said, I'm committed to gardening organically as naturally as possible. I even prefer to avoid organic controls as much as I can. You know, this plant obviously isn't doing the best. For some reason, these plants over here seem to be doing better. So I've just basically learned to accept that I'm going to have a certain amount of loss in the garden, and it is worth it to me to have the highest quality, most natural produce possible. It is frustrating, though, sometimes when I see my hard work not necessarily paying off as much as I feel like it should. And you can see through here, I have some carrots growing. I had spotty germination, so I don't have as many carrots as I hoped for. I do have some bush beans, which these are struggling a little bit too. It's been a challenging year in the garden. These nasturtiums are very lovely, and across the walkway, these nasturtiums are really lovely as well. My dill, this is probably actually the best dill that I've had as far as providing me with a lot of foliage before going to flower. So I'm really excited because I thought this dill was going to flower much before I had cucumbers ready. But since I am seeing signs of my first cucumber harvest coming soon, that's really exciting because the main reason that I'm growing my dill is for pickles. And I like to use these flower heads here in the pickles along with some of the foliage. So, you know, getting those to both produce at the same time is, you know, the goal when it comes to pickles. So over here is where my potatoes were growing. They're kind of on the way out now. I'm not sure how much of that is because they're getting ready to harvest. It is about time that could be happening. They have struggled a bit with getting nibbled on by some kind of animal, but I'm thinking pretty soon I may start digging up some of these plants and seeing if there are any potatoes underneath. Now, if your goal is to get long storing potatoes and to have your potatoes last as long as possible, you do want to wait until the plants are completely died back before digging up the potatoes. I know with this area here and with the animal damage that I had on the potatoes. I'm not really anticipating getting a large harvest of potatoes, a large and a long storage harvest of potatoes. So I'm hoping to harvest some new potatoes while they're tender and fresh and hopefully extra delicious. So here you can see these poppies are kind of on the way out, but they were very lovely. We still have some nice little flowers, but these are kind of on the way out. We do have a few buds that haven't bloomed yet, so we should have a little more display from the poppies, which is exciting. This zinnia here was really lovely. This particular bloom is on the way out, so I need to pinch this off, but as you can see, the plant is growing and will be giving me more blooms soon. And I have this one that's about to bloom really soon. I can't remember for sure which variety that is, so it'll be really exciting to see it. And another one here. And here we have some calendula. You'll see I have calendula sprinkled all throughout the garden. It's one of my favorite medicinal herbs to grow. Calendula is so easy to grow and it blooms so abundantly, and the flowers are so useful. I like to let a few of them just bloom for the pollinators and for the beauty. Most of them I do harvest. I'll pinch off the flowers, and then I'll let them dry inside in my house, and then I use them in skincare. I like to infuse oils in them for skincare, and I also do like to use them for other medicinal purposes as well throughout the winter. So here you can see mixed in with the potatoes, I've got some lovely flowers. We've got some cosmos here, some more cosmos. This one is done. This one is close to done, but we'll let it go another day or so, and lots of buds coming up. There's some zinnias back there that are yet to bloom. Here, this is a Benari's giant lilac zinnia. This is the very first flower of this variety that I have open, so it's a really beautiful color, so I think that'll add some nice loveliness to the garden. You can see I planted some bush beans in here in a row in front of the potatoes. These are actually just starting to flower. Got a few more zinnias here. Here's another one of those giant salmon rose zinnias, really beautiful. And over here, this flower is on the way out, but this is the giant wine zinnia that I mentioned. And as you can see, this will be gracing us with more flowers really soon. Another lovely nasturtium. So on this trellis wall here, I have another wall of tomatoes, and you can see the same evidence of disease on these tomatoes here. These are actually fine. These are just suffering a little bit because they were sprawling on the ground, and I just kind of clipped them up. So by the end of the day, those should be perked up. So on the bright side, though, we are finally starting to see tomato fruits. If you remember on my last garden tour, I was starting to get a little discouraged because I have all these tomato plants and I was not really seeing fruit from them yet. So we had a very long, cold start to spring. You know, the entire month of May and the first half of June was really cold here in Connecticut, a lot colder than it normally is that time of year. And because of that, I think a lot of my warm weather plants are behind. They got off to a really slow start. Normally, I am just harvesting my first larger tomatoes at this point, and I don't have any that are really close to ready. I have started to harvest cherry tomatoes. You know, my faithful Sun Gold tomatoes were actually not late to yield. Those yielded the very beginning of July, and they've been yielding since then. So those are dependable. I highly recommend Sun Gold cherry tomatoes. The larger tomatoes are behind, but at least I am starting to see fruits now, so we shouldn't be too long before we harvest. Longer than I want to wait, but not too long. So these large ones in here are black from Tula, which I tried for the first time last year. I didn't get a big yield, but it was really delicious, and it looks like we're on track to get a larger yield this year. So that's exciting. Here's another of the giant wine flowers. You can see it really is giant, and it's really lovely. So this is one of my favorite zinnia varieties. And here you can see that my bean tunnels are really making a lot of progress. You know, these beans have been climbing up the trellises. I have harvested a couple beans, not a real lot so far, but just enough to have a little snack in the garden. And I know it won't be that long before we're getting a real harvest of beans. I love planting beans on a trellis like this because as you can see, this variety, which I planted a little bit earlier, has already reached up to the top. This variety over here is I planted this a little later, it's a little more behind, but it is climbing really nicely. And you can see we're starting to get lots of flowers in here. So that's going to translate to lots of beans. So you can see we're starting to get some beans in here. This variety is called the rattlesnake bean. Now most of these are typically a flattened green bean, as you can see, but they usually have purple streaks. I haven't really seen the purple streaks on them this year. I'm not sure if that's because it's been more rainy. We haven't had as much sunlight to develop the purple, but we'll see. Over here, these are the Vortex beans. I'm gonna see if I can find any. See, here's an actual bean. You can see this one is more rounded. These are longer beans. This is probably my favorite. I think the Vortex is probably my favorite, but the rattlesnake is a really close second. They're both really delicious and they work really well. They complement each other well, I think. So pretty soon, this will fill in. See how it's like nice and thick down here at the base? It'll fill in and be nice and thick at the top. And this variety over here will catch up and this will just be a lovely tunnel. So over here we have a second bean tunnel. This one you can see has the purple stems. This is a purple bean variety, and often the colors in the plant itself will kind of mimic the colors of the flower or the fruit. You can see it has purple flowers as well. This over here is the rattlesnake variety again. This is the flattened green bean with the purple streaks. So this tunnel was planted slightly later than this part of the tunnel here. So it's not quite as far along, but you can see it's making great progress, and I'm really excited to harvest beans. Pole beans, I think, in the garden give you one of the biggest bangs for your buck, at least as far, literally as far as cost of seeds and also as far as time investment versus payoff. I find that they yield really reliably. They're very easy to grow, and they just keep yielding and keep going. I find that pole beans, usually at some point we kind of slow down harvesting them. We kind of miss some of them just because we've eaten so many that we're kind of not really as much in the mood for beans anymore. And we just have so many that we can't keep up. And that's usually when I let the last beans on the plant dry and go to seed, and then I can use that seed next year to make my beans free, which is, even better. So back here, you can see this was filled with lettuce and other greens that had all bolted. I did come through and pull them up. I put down a fresh layer of compost. You can see over here across the walkway in this bed. This was similar. This was all lettuce and greens. I did allow some of the wild arugula to stay because we've still been harvesting from this. But I pulled everything else out, and I did replant with seeds just a couple days ago, so I don't see any germination yet. But those should be germinating really soon. This bed over here that we looked at first, I have not yet planted, but I will probably be planting this with more lettuce and greens. The idea is that by planting them here in a more shaded spot of the garden, where I have the tomatoes on the front to shield and I have the beans over here, by planting the lettuce in a shadier area, that should hopefully help me to be able to extend my lettuce harvest a little bit. So it did work. We had been harvesting lettuce from this spot, all season. We had a really abundant lettuce harvest, but it finally did get too hot and the lettuce was at the point where it wanted to bolt and produce seeds. So I pulled it out. I planted new lettuce, which is a little bit of a gamble this time of year. We're in mid-July. It's basically the hottest part of the year. Lettuce doesn't really like to germinate in the heat, and it doesn't really do well in the heat. But I'm doing the best that I can by giving it a nice shady spot, and we'll see if it does germinate and we get at least a respectable harvest anyway. If not, I can always replant something else here instead. Now here I have my two other Brassica beds, so we'll look at these one at a time. Let's head over to the cabbage first. So the cabbage is looking really lovely. This cabbage here is actually ready to harvest, so I'm planning to make this for dinner tomorrow. I'm going to come harvest this and we're going to make egg roll in a bowl. And this cabbage here, this has a little bit longer to go, but you can see it's starting to make a head. It's not all that far behind. And then this cabbage here will be ready really soon. The purple cabbage is a little bit slower, so it'll be a little while till this is ready, but you can see it is just barely starting to make a head. And the Savoy cabbage here. Growing vegetables like this is to harvest them and ultimately eat them, which I am really excited about. But cabbage I just find so beautiful when it grows that I'm almost a little disappointed to harvest it because then I won't be able to look at it anymore. But it is almost time to start planning. Well, it is time to start planning. Almost time to start planting for the fall garden. So I'm hoping to get a second harvest of cabbage in the fall, and then hopefully we'll be able to enjoy its beauty a little bit longer. So especially the purple cabbage, I just love the cool tones of the purple cabbage. I think it's so beautiful and soothing and refreshing in a summer garden. And we have a little garden spider friend here, hopefully keeping the bugs away from my cabbage. And we also have a rogue bean that I'm not sure if I planted this and it escaped the trellis and came this way, or this may have actually been a volunteer from a bean that I let go to seed last year that just dropped here and sprouted. And look, we actually have a tiny bean in here. I'm gonna have to remember to check on this when I come out to harvest these beans as well. So let's head over here to the other Brassica patch. This one is primarily kale. You can see the kale is getting a little bit tall for my cover. I probably should extend the hoops and give it a little more space. You can see it's kind of bunched down from being pushed on by the netting. In here we've got some cauliflower. This is almost ready to harvest. This one needs a little bit longer. So I love fresh garden cauliflower, so I'll be coming out to harvest that really soon. See a little more cabbage in here. And this is another variety of cauliflower in here. This one must be a little bit of a later maturing variety because I don't see any signs of a head in there yet, but probably soon. Cauliflower has always been one of those kind of hit or miss vegetables in the garden with me. When it does well, it's lovely and wonderful, but it doesn't always do well for me. So those heads are a little bit on the smaller side, but they will still be delicious. So I'm going to consider that a win. So in my little hodgepodge bed on the end here, you can see my feverfew just started blooming, and how beautiful is that? I love these tiny little daisy flowers. I just planted that this year for the first time, and this should be a perennial in my zone, so this should hopefully come back and we should have feverfew every year. Got some cosmos here. This one is particularly lovely. Got a zinnia here. Lots of parsley, some of which has gone to seed. You can see these little flowers here. This is what parsley does when it goes to seed. Some of these parsleys have overwintered from last year. The ones that are going to seed are all from last year, and there are some new ones from this year kind of mixed in. And it looks like my leeks have been overgrown by these weeds. So I have to come in and pull those out and give my leeks a little bit of breathing room. My cherry tomato patch. This is honestly kind of sad. Now, first, let's look at the cherry tomatoes themselves. We have a couple ripe cherry tomatoes, not a lot. That is not sad. Normally at this point in the season, my cherry tomato patch is basically an unmanageable jungle, which, you know, sounds kind of intense, and it kind of is, but it's overall positive because it means so much fruit. This year, the cherry tomatoes are a little stunted. It's been a challenging year with tomatoes, in case you didn't pick up on that. I think that it's ultimately going to be okay. We're going to get a decent harvest, but it's not going to be like most years when it comes to tomatoes. I am anticipating a really good harvest with several other things in the garden. I think cucumbers will do really well. Zucchini. I mean, I haven't harvested any zucchini yet, but I do have lots that are starting to flower, so I'm anticipating it should be a decent zucchini year as well. It was a good broccoli year, so, you know, I gotta focus on the wins. I think, surprisingly, the peppers on my deck are actually doing really well, even though those are not a fan of cold. Tomatoes seem to be the hardest hit this year. That being said, the tomatoes that we have been harvesting have been delicious. The tomatoes on my deck in pots are actually doing quite a bit better than the tomatoes out here in the garden, so we should still get a decent tomato harvest. What I have been doing this year, rather than including all of the plants growing on my deck in this regular garden tour, I've been filming separate container garden tours because it's very long if I film everything all at once, and I find that container gardening is kind of a separate topic. So most likely, the next video, if not the next video, one really soon that I post will be a container garden video, so I'll give you an update on all of those cherry tomatoes in that video. Here, some of my snapdragons are really blooming. Very beautiful. Across the walkway here. This one, as you can see, a lot of it's actually done blooming. So this was at peak maybe a week ago, but it's still really lovely. So here are my largest zucchini plants. And you'll see in here, we haven't harvested zucchinis yet, but we have lots of flowers. These, what I can see, are male flowers. There is a female flower down there. You can see the tiny zucchini on that. As I said, I haven't been harvesting zucchini yet, but I should be harvesting some really soon. There's my snapdragons again. We have a few little straggler poppies still blooming. Really beautiful, and I love this cosmos plant. Now here is my sauce tomato patch. As you can see, this one has been hit by disease as well, but despite that, we have a handful of tomatoes in here. So it'll be a little while till these are ready, but that is really exciting. I see lots of salsa in my future. You can see here is another of these giant wine zinnias, really lovely. And another beautiful calendula plant as well. Now here in front of the garden as well, I think I did mention in the last garden tour, I can't remember if I showed you my new blueberry bushes or not yet. They're very tiny, not really much to see yet. But I did, I talked about this whole area here. Basically straightening it out a little bit, managing it a little bit better, and adding some little blueberry bushes to the front. So these are tiny bushes. It'll be a couple years before we get any harvest from them. Oh, and this is actually flowering, which we don't want because I just planted these and they're very tiny. I don't want it putting its energy into producing fruit yet. So as painful as it is to pull those flowers off, it's got to be done. So these blueberry bushes, I realize, are probably planted a little closer to the fence than is ideal. We'll see what happens with it. I did choose smaller growing blueberry varieties. These aren't the really huge ones. And I'm hoping that they'll work okay against the fence. If not, I may end up having to prune the back of them a little bit. We'll see. But we'll just see what happens. I know at least for a few years they should be fine. So we'll see. So as we head over to the side yard garden, I figured I would show you that my runner beans are just starting to flower. We haven't gotten a lot of blooms yet, but they are getting there. And hopefully, the hope is that at some point this trellis as well will be completely covered. I did plant these a little bit later than my other beans, but we'll see. Hopefully they'll catch up. This is the first year I've grown runner beans. So here's the raspberry patch. We have been harvesting lots and lots of berries from these raspberries. They've been so delicious. So it looks like I need to come out again and do another harvest. I harvested some last night, but I didn't get through the whole raspberry patch. And some raspberries have fallen. Raspberries like this that fall and get crushed are treats for the chickens, and they do not object to that at all. So lots of raspberries this year. This is our new garden expansion. I still think of it as new. This is, I think, the third year we've been growing in it, so it's not really new anymore, but it is newer than the other garden, and there's a lot going on up here too, so let's head up and take a look. Oh, this isn't really part of this garden, but I picked up this hydrangea on clearance the other day, and this is a lovely one with dark leaves, which I've never grown before. So this is not obviously going to be its permanent spot. This is a little bit straggly and needs to get in the ground. You can see why it's on clearance, but it is getting all these new leaves. So I think that it needs a little bit of a trim and some love, but I think that this will ultimately do really well. So I forgot to put my hose away before this garden tour, so we'll try to ignore that. Over here against this fence is where I put the cucumber transplants that I mentioned. Actually, I think these particular plants are not transplants. I didn't have enough of, there's a squash beetle. We're gonna have to come deal with him after. I did not put enough of, or I didn't get enough germination for my silver slicer cucumbers, which is one of my favorites. So I stuck some seeds in the ground. Those germinated. We have extra over here. This is one of my transplants. This one I believe is a lemon cucumber. It's mixed in with the lemon balm, so it's a little hard to see, but I don't think that may be a female flower there with a little lemon cucumber on the end. So we should get lots of bonus cucumbers from this fence here. So my biggest use with cucumbers is to make refrigerator pickles. We do like to eat some fresh. We like to munch on some, and we like to put them in salad. I like to make tzatziki sauce. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, or tzatziki dip. We really enjoy that as well in the summer. But by far, my primary use of these cucumbers is to make refrigerator pickles with, which I think I do actually have a video posted, I think from last summer, showing the recipe. Super easy and delicious. So I'll link that below in case you're inundated with cucumbers and are looking for a super easy pickle recipe, no canning required. So here's my mini little herb patch along the corner here. This was my problem corner that I didn't really know what to do with when it came to this garden, so I just left it and stuck plants in the ground. My feverfew here is just starting to bloom. I've got some nasturtiums spilling over from the bed here, calendula, and I've got some sage. Most of these flowers are actually planted in this bed and just spilling over, but we have some sage here, lemon balm that planted itself, probably seeded from my lemon balm patch over there. And we've got thyme, which I don't think you can even really see. Over here I have some skullcap, and I haven't harvested this yet. I planted this last year. I probably could harvest it this year. Maybe I will go ahead and harvest some and make a fresh tincture with it. This is a great medicinal herb for things like anxiety, sleep, rest, just general restfulness. That's a good herb for that. And chamomile as well. And here is one of my larger tomato patches. When I say larger, this area only has 5 plants. I don't mean that the area is large. I mean that these are some of the tomatoes that I planted the earliest. And so these plants have been in the ground the longest and had the most time to grow. So as you can see, we're getting lots of green tomatoes on these plants. Not quite ready to harvest yet, but hopefully won't be too long. Down here, I've got, this is one of my favorite nasturtiums. This is a cherry rose jewel, and you can see they're thriving and just growing really abundantly. And here, one of my favorite marigolds, the lemon gem, some beautiful alyssum. Have a couple peppers in pots over here. Here's my asparagus patch, which we've been through the saga of the asparagus. I'll be hopefully fixing this problem in the fall. Here, as you can see, the weeds are really growing up. But I've got some various zucchinis that I've planted through here to be my next harvest of zucchini. Once the ones out in the garden are starting to, out in the main part of the garden that we already looked at, are starting to slow down a little bit. I've got a little trio of tomato plants in pots here, and here is the most jungly part of my tomato patch. So this tomato patch here got planted a little on the early side, not too long after that other patch that we already looked at. As you can see here, they're significantly taller than me, even taking into account the fact that they're in a raised bed. The raised bed is 12 inches tall, and that's more than 12 inches taller than me. So these tomatoes are very wild, very, very lush, very abundant with leaf growth. We don't have a lot of fruit set on these yet. I am actually just starting to see some fruit set, which is pretty exciting. So you can see in here, we've got some little ones here. There's a little one in here, lots of flowers. And I anticipate that ultimately we will get a good yield from this little tomato jungle here. It's definitely going to be behind my other tomato areas, but with the way the plants are, I'm hoping that, you can see there's some little flowers just starting here too. I'm hoping that these will catch up and yield. There's some little green tomatoes back there. I'm not sure if you can really see them in the video, but we do have lots of future growth or lots of future harvests coming up. These tomatoes here, you can see this one's a cherry tomato. I've got 2 cherry tomatoes, and you can see some little fruits back there. In this cluster, all right, we're gonna duck underneath this little tomato tunnel here and head to the back. So here's the back of this whole tomato jungle here. So this is my sprouting broccoli. I actually need to go ahead and pull these out. As you can see, they've bolted. They're setting seed now. I'm not planning to save seed from these this year, so I can go ahead and pull those. The lettuce that I had in here has also bolted, so this can get pulled out. So I do have 3 varieties of sprouting broccoli here. This one in the middle has not yielded yet. This one I'll be leaving here. The one that hasn't yielded yet is purple sprouting broccoli, and I did see some mixed directions on growing that broccoli, and some sites said that the best way to grow it is to plant it in the fall, allow it to overwinter, and then harvest from it in the spring. Now, I think it said that for zone 7 and warmer. I'm actually in zone 6, so I'm not sure if that's going to work in my zone or not. But the ones that haven't yielded yet, I'm going to leave those broccoli plants here. I'm going to let them stay here over the winter. We'll find out if they live through the winter in my zone, and then we'll see if we get an early harvest. But the 2 varieties that have yielded, I'm going to go ahead and pull those out. I haven't done it yet because I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to plant in their place. I'm thinking what I might do is start some fall crops and then put those in this bed. And there isn't really a big rush for that. I have a few weeks before I need to get those. I should start them from seed now, but I'll have a few weeks before they actually need to get in the ground here. So that's why I haven't rushed to pull these out yet, but that will be getting done at some point. And then on the other half of this bed, we do have some tomatoes. These are I think these are the last tomatoes in my garden to get planted this year. So you can see we are just starting to get the very first little bits of fruit here. These are not going to be ready to harvest for a while. I've got a beautiful chamomile plant spilling out into the walkway. Now on this trellis here, you can see that I have some snap peas here and here. These are pretty much done. You can see they're drying up, although we do have a couple flowers, which is unexpected. But the peas are pretty much drying up, the plants are done. I'm actually leaving these here because there are some peas on here, and I'm hoping that these will dry up and I can collect some seeds for fall planting. So that's the reason these are still here. But to replace them, I did put in some pumpkin plants. These are pie pumpkins, so they're not really huge, the fruits. And we have a couple of these on each side of the trellis, and those should hopefully be climbing and filling in really nicely. Here's strawberries, which are done for the year. And over here, I've got garlic, which this is really about ready to pull. You can see that I have multiple leaves at the base of the garlic stalk that have dried up, turned brown and dried up. That's the sign that these are done. I should say pretty much done. I'm actually going to leave these in a little bit longer. I did pull a couple the other day as a test just to see how they were, and they didn't really look ready. So I'm going to leave the rest of these here for another week or so, and we'll see. Hopefully we can get a little more size on the bulbs and just a little more development. So those should be coming out fairly soon. Is these little mini tomatoes here. These are large fruited tomatoes, but the plants themselves are mini. I just put these in. If you saw my most recent video, we talked about getting a second crop of tomatoes for fall, and we've rooted some suckers together, and these are those suckers. So I planted these a few days ago. You can see that they're really small, but they are settling in nicely. So I think that once these have a little bit of time to adjust, those will catch up really well, and hopefully we'll get some fall tomatoes from those. I'm not sure how necessary it was this year to plan for a second crop of tomatoes, because my original tomatoes are so late that I'm hoping, even though they're starting late, that they'll also yield late into the season and we will get an extended tomato harvest, or at least not necessarily extended, but it'll be later. It'll go later into the season than normal. So I don't know if the second planting for fall tomatoes was really necessary or not, but I figured, I didn't really have anything to lose. It didn't hurt to give it a try. So hopefully we'll get some more bonus tomatoes from these plants. Now over here, you can see the blackberries are starting to ripen. This cluster here is fully green, but we do have, there's a bunch here starting to ripen, so it shouldn't be too long before we're going to be harvesting blackberries. I don't think we're going to get a huge harvest this year, but it should be the biggest harvest that I've gotten yet. These plants, I think this is their third year, if I'm remembering right. And you can see we've got a nice pepper here in a pot, got a tomato, mostly looking nice, but you can see there is some sign of disease here. So I need to come pull those leaves off of this plant. This one, as you can see, is starting to get fruit as well. There's been a lot of growth and a lot of change since the last garden tour. And even though there are many things in the garden that are a lot slower than I would like, that are a lot later than usual this year, I still think this is going to be an abundant garden year. And I'm really looking forward to harvesting all of the bounty that this garden will provide, and I'm also looking forward to sharing it with you. So thank you so much for joining me today on this little walk through my garden. I hope you're having a great day, and I can't wait to see you soon. I'll see you next time.